People of God, we do not step into this week casually. We step in intentionally because Mondays are not ordinary days. They are gateways. Before emails speak, before meetings decide, before pressure tries to name your destiny, we stand at the threshold of this week and declare that alignment precedes movement. When heaven is aligned, earth must respond. When purpose is clear, confusion loses its voice. Tonight, this is not a routine prayer. This is a realignment of time, focus, authority, and assignment. I hear the Spirit saying many of you have been busy but not positioned, active but not aligned, productive but not purposeful. And today God is correcting direction without condemning you. He is not angry. He is intentional. He is pulling your steps back into rhythm with His will, recalibrating your decisions, adjusting your reactions, and synchronizing your week with divine timing. What felt delayed was not denial. It was divine protection until alignment arrived. This week will not drain you, confuse you, or scatter you. This week will obey God's design for your life. Every assignment that does not belong to you will fall off. Every distraction sent to delay you will lose its power. Every door that looks right but is not God will close without regret. And every door ordained for you will open without struggle. Alignment removes struggle. Alignment brings clarity. Alignment brings rest, even in responsibility. Before we go any further, I want you to participate in this moment of agreement. Like this video as a prophetic act that says, I choose alignment. Subscribe to this channel for daily prayer so your spirit stays positioned, not just inspired. And I want you to write amen in the comments as a declaration that this week belongs to God. Then, very importantly, comment one thing you're believing God for today, because when you speak it, heaven responds. Now take a breath, because this is the moment where God takes the lead and you release control. You are not behind, you are not late, you are not confused, you are aligning. And when alignment happens, momentum follows. This week will not just move, it will move in the right direction, at the right pace, under the right authority, for the right purpose. People of God, alignment is not about speed. It is about accuracy. And accuracy is what heaven honors. When God speaks of realignment, He is not suggesting that you are broken. He is revealing that you are valuable enough to be adjusted. Just as a skilled archer recalibrates the arrow before release, God recalibrates your thoughts, your decisions, and your priorities before momentum begins. Many have mistaken motion for progress, but heaven never confuses activity with obedience. This moment is about allowing God to gently, deliberately, and lovingly bring your inner world back into agreement with His divine intention. The Spirit is addressing the noise that has crept into your mind, the subtle distractions that have altered your focus without your awareness. Thoughts shape decisions, and decisions shape direction. When your thoughts are scattered, your life follows. That is why God begins alignment at the level of the mind. He is silencing every voice that does not originate in Him, every internal argument that keeps you torn between faith and fear, obedience and convenience, purpose and prayer. Peace is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of divine order within responsibility. Some of you have been carrying mental weights that were never assigned to you. You have been thinking about things God never told you to manage, worrying about outcomes He never asked you to control. Alignment releases you from the illusion of self-sufficiency and restores your dependence on divine wisdom. When your mind aligns with God, your soul exhales. Anxiety loses its grip, not because the problem disappears, but because authority has been restored. When God governs your thoughts, clarity replaces chaos. God is also realigning your decisions. Decisions are doors, and every door you open determines the environment you will live in. There are decisions you made in survival mode, choices born out of urgency rather than obedience. Heaven is not condemning those decisions. Heaven is correcting the trajectory they created. A redirected decision today can redeem an entire season tomorrow. God is teaching you that obedience is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it feels like waiting, but it always produces peace. Many of you have been at crossroads, feeling the pressure to decide quickly, afraid that delay equals failure. But divine alignment teaches patience without fear. God does not rush clarity, and he does not panic under deadlines. When your decisions align with his wisdom, you will stop second-guessing yourself. You will move forward with confidence, not because you know everything, but because you trust the one who does. Alignment removes regret because it anchors your choices in eternal perspective. Your priorities are also being reordered. Priority determines power flow. Whatever sits at the top receives the most energy, attention, and devotion. When God is displaced, everything else becomes demanding and exhausting. When God is restored to his rightful position, everything else finds its proper place. Alignment is not about adding God to your schedule. It is about allowing God to define your schedule. What you value determines how you live, and how you live reveals what you truly believe. Some of you have been saying yes to things that look good but drain your spirit. You have been faithful to people, systems, and expectations that God never endorsed. Alignment gives you permission to say no without guilt and yes without fear. It teaches you that obedience sometimes requires withdrawal. Not every opportunity is a calling. Not every request is an assignment, and not every open door is God's door. Discernment increases when priorities are aligned. As your priorities realign, your energy will return. Exhaustion is often a symptom of misalignment, not laziness. When you pour into what God has not assigned, your strength leaks away. When you invest in what God has ordained, strength multiplies. Heaven supplies what heaven assigns. God never expects you to sustain what he did not authorize. Alignment restores sustainability, rhythm, and balance to your life. There is also an emotional alignment taking place. Emotions are powerful indicators, but poor leaders. When emotions drive decisions, instability follows. God is not removing your emotions. He is repositioning them. Joy becomes a source of strength, not dependency. Peace becomes a compass, not a reward. Faith becomes a posture, not a reaction. Alignment allows you to feel without being controlled, to care without being consumed. Spiritual alignment brings internal coherence. What you pray aligns with what you pursue. What you declare aligns with how you live. What you believe aligns with how you respond. There is no longer a war between your confession and your conduct. Integrity is alignment in action. When your inner world agrees with God, your outer world begins to respond accordingly. God is also aligning your perspective. Perspective determines interpretation, and interpretation determines response. When your perspective is misaligned, even blessings feel burdensome and opportunities feel threatening. God is lifting your vision above immediate circumstances and anchoring it in eternal truth. You begin to see delay as preparation, silence as instruction, and pressure as refinement. Alignment changes how you see, and how you see changes everything. This alignment is gentle, not forceful. God is not dragging you into position. He is inviting you into agreement. Alignment requires surrender, not struggle. Resistance prolongs discomfort, but surrender accelerates peace. When you stop fighting God's direction and start trusting his wisdom, rest replaces resistance. Trust is alignment expressed through faith. As alignment deepens, your prayers become clearer. You stop praying out of panic and start praying out of partnership. You no longer beg for outcomes. You declare alignment with purpose. Heaven responds swiftly to aligned prayers because they carry divine intent. God honors prayers that agree with his will because they advance his agenda in the earth. Your relationships are also touched by alignment. When you are aligned, you attract what belongs and repel what distracts. Some connections fade not because of conflict, but because of calling. God is not punishing you by removing people. He's protecting you by refining proximity. Alignment sharpens boundaries and purifies fellowship. You become selective, not isolated. Alignment restores confidence without arrogance. You walk with assurance without striving. You speak with authority without force. You move with intention without haste. When you are aligned, you are no longer easily shaken by opinions, criticism, or comparison. Your validation comes from obedience, not applause. Stability becomes your testimony. There is a supernatural calm that accompanies alignment. It is not passivity, it is assurance. You know where you are going, even if the path is still unfolding. You trust the process because you trust the author. Alignment allows you to move forward even when details are incomplete because direction is clear. This alignment is preparing you for increase. Increase without alignment becomes a burden. Expansion without order becomes chaos. God aligns before he enlarges. He stabilizes before he accelerates. He roots before he elevates. What is being aligned now will sustain what is coming next. You are entering a week where your thoughts will be clearer, your decisions more intentional, and your priorities more focused. Distractions will lose their appeal. Confusion will lose its authority. Peace will govern your steps. This is not emotional excitement. This is spiritual order being restored. As you remain still in this alignment, allow God to continue his work. Do not rush the process. Do not resist the correction. Do not fear the adjustment. Alignment is evidence of divine involvement. God only corrects what he plans to use. God only aligns what he intends to advance. People of God, timing is one of the greatest proofs of trust because anyone can move when pressured, but only the aligned can wait without fear. Walking in God's timing requires a surrender that goes deeper than patience. It requires a release of urgency that is rooted in insecurity. Human pressure shouts now, rushes decisions, and creates anxiety around delay. But divine timing whispers peace, settles the spirit, and reassures the heart that nothing ordained by God can be missed. When you walk in God's timing, you are not late, you are protected. Many have confused delay with denial, yet heaven often delays to shield you from what you are not yet prepared to handle. Pressure makes you reach prematurely for outcomes your character has not yet matured to sustain. God's timing is never about withholding good. It is about preparing vessels. When the timing is right, you will not have to force doors open, negotiate access, or compromise values. What belongs to you will recognize you without struggle. Timing removes strain from obedience. The Spirit is teaching you to discern the difference between urgency and instruction. Urgency creates restlessness, sleeplessness, and impulsive reactions. Instruction produces clarity, steadiness, and peace. When God speaks, he does not compete with anxiety. His voice settles you even when the message stretches you. Pressure speaks loudly but lacks authority. God's timing speaks softly but carries power. Learning to listen without panic is a sign of spiritual maturity. Some of you have been rushing because you fear falling behind. You measure progress against other people's timelines and assume speed equals success. But God never compares destinies. He customizes journeys. What looks like delay in your life may be divine sequencing. Heaven works in order, not haste. When one piece is missing, the whole structure is unstable. God waits not because he is slow, but because he is precise. Walking in God's timing also means releasing the need to explain your pace to people who do not understand your calling. Not everyone will agree with your waiting. Some will interpret your stillness as weakness, but stillness in obedience is strength. Jesus waited 30 years before public ministry, yet he never rushed to prove himself. Timing protected his purpose. Silence prepared his authority. Human pressure often comes disguised as opportunity. Doors open, invitations appear, offers sound promising, yet alignment asks one question: is this God's now or man's rush? Not every open door is a green light. Some doors open to test discernment. God's timing carries peace even when it challenges you. Pressure carries anxiety even when it flatters you. Learning to wait without resentment and move without fear is evidence of alignment. When you walk in God's timing, your emotions settle into trust. You stop reacting to deadlines and start responding to direction. You no longer chase validation through productivity. You become content knowing that obedience is fruitful even when results are unseen. Timing teaches you that unseen preparation is just as valuable as visible progress. God's timing also refines patience in the soul. Patience is not passive endurance, it is active trust. It is choosing to remain faithful while waiting for manifestation. In patience, character deepens, discernment sharpens, and dependency shifts from self-effort to divine reliance. Waiting seasons are classrooms, not punishments. What you learn there cannot be taught in motion. Many of you are in seasons where God has intentionally slowed your pace. You feel restrained, interrupted, or paused. This is not stagnation, it is alignment. God slows you down to protect you from burnout, misdirection, and premature exposure. Speed without covering leaves you vulnerable. Timing keeps you covered. Walking in God's timing also means trusting Him with outcomes. Pressure makes you try to control results. Timing teaches you to trust process. When you release control, peace enters. When peace governs, clarity follows. God does not ask you to predict outcomes. He asks you to obey steps. One step at a time keeps you dependent and attentive. There is also healing in God's timing. Some delays exist because wounds need time to close. God will not advance you into environments that reopen what He is still restoring. Healing cannot be rushed. Wholeness requires patience. Timing ensures that when you arrive, you are not bleeding internally while smiling externally. Walking in divine timing shifts how you pray. Your prayers become less frantic and more focused. You stop asking when and start asking how. You stop begging for speed and start asking for wisdom. Prayer becomes communion, not negotiation. Timing aligns your requests with heaven's calendar. God's timing also aligns relationships. When timing is right, connections form naturally. You stop forcing compatibility and start experiencing covenant. Relationships birthed in pressure often fracture under weight. Relationships birthed in timing withstand seasons. God connects you when hearts are ready, not just available. In God's timing, provision arrives without panic. You stop worrying about missing resources because provision follows purpose. God never sends you where He does not supply you. Timing positions you under open heavens. Rushed movement often leads to financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and spiritual dryness. Timed movement leads to sustainability. The Spirit is also dismantling fear of missing out. Fear-driven urgency makes you believe that if you do not act now, you will lose everything. God's timing reassures you that what is meant for you cannot pass you by. Delay cannot cancel destiny. Waiting does not disqualify you. Obedience secures your place. Walking in God's timing produces confidence without arrogance. You move when instructed and wait when restrained. You are not easily pressured by opinions, trends, or comparisons. Your identity is anchored, not reactive. You trust God's calendar more than social clock. There is a supernatural rest attached to divine timing. Rest does not mean inactivity, it means freedom from striving. You work diligently without desperation. You prepare without panic. You plan without obsession. Rest guards your mind while you wait and strengthens your hands when you move. God's timing also teaches humility. It reminds you that life is not controlled by your effort alone. It humbles ambition and sanctifies desire. You learn to submit goals to God rather than demand outcomes from Him. Humility attracts grace, and grace accelerates purpose at the right moment. As you align with God's timing, discernment increases. You sense when to speak and when to remain silent. You know when to advance and when to pause. Wisdom replaces impulse. Calm replaces confusion. Timing sharpens intuition because your spirit is no longer clouded by fear. Well, this week, walking in God's timing will require trust in small decisions, choosing rest over rush, choosing prayer over pressure, choosing obedience over appearance. Small acts of trust accumulate into great alignment. Timing is not one decision, it is a lifestyle. God is training you to move without anxiety and wait without doubt. This training is preparing you for greater responsibility. Those who cannot wait cannot be trusted with weight. Timing builds capacity. Capacity sustains calling. As you remain aligned with divine timing, your soul settles into assurance. You stop measuring success by speed and start measuring it by faithfulness. You learn that being on time with God is more valuable than being early for people. Heaven rewards obedience, not urgency. Walking in God's timing will protect your peace, preserve your purpose, and position you for longevity. Your steps become ordered, your heart becomes steady, and your future becomes secure. People of God, discernment is the quiet authority that keeps you from carrying what heaven never assigned. Not every responsibility that finds you belongs to you, and not every task that looks urgent is divinely appointed. Distractions do not always arrive as chaos. Many arrive as opportunities that look helpful, productive, even spiritual. Discernment is the grace to recognize what is good, but not God. Beneficial, but not ordained. Urgent, but not aligned. When discernment is active, your spirit remains light, even when your hands are busy. The enemy of purpose is not always opposition. Sometimes it is overload. Distractions pile weight on the soul, slowly draining clarity until obedience feels heavy. God never burdens you with confusion. When assignments are misdirected, peace diminishes. Discernment restores peace. By filtering what enters your life, it teaches you to pause before grieving, to listen before committing, to pray before proceeding. This is not hesitation. This is wisdom guarding destiny. Many people struggle because they believe saying no is selfish, but discernment reveals that misplaced yeses steal energy from rightful obedience. When you say yes to what God did not ask, you inadvertently say no to what He did. Discernment is not rejection of people, it is protection of purpose. God values your obedience more than your availability. You are not called to meet every need, you are called to fulfill your assignment. Distractions often come wrapped in familiarity. Old habits, old roles, old expectations attempt to pull you back into patterns God already delivered you from. Discernment recognizes when nostalgia becomes sabotage. Growth requires release. God is not cruel when He removes old assignments. He is intentional. What served one season may hinder the next. Discernment gives you courage to let go without resentment. There is also a subtle form of distraction called comparison. When you compare your assignment to others, clarity blurs. You begin to pursue outcomes God never planned for you. Discernment restores contentment. It anchors you in your lane and frees you from competition. You stop measuring progress by proximity to others and start measuring obedience by peace. What God assigns to you will fit you without strain. God trains discernment through stillness. When life is noisy, discernment weakens. When you cultivate quiet, sensitivity sharpens. The Spirit often speaks softly. He does not shout over chaos. Creating space for God to speak is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Discernment grows where listening is prioritized. Silence becomes sacred when it hosts divine instruction. Misdirected assignments often appeal to ego. They make you feel needed, important, indispensable. Discernment dismantles ego and restores humility. God does not call you to prove worth through overextension. Your value is not determined by how much you do, but by whom you obey. Discernment keeps you grounded in identity rather than performance. When discernment is active, emotional manipulation loses power. You stop making decisions out of guilt, fear, or obligation. You recognize when pressure is being used to bypass prayer. Discernment protects your emotional health by placing boundaries around access. Healthy boundaries are spiritual safeguards, not signs of weakness. God also uses discernment to protect timing. Some assignments are ripe but premature. Discernment recognizes seasonality. Just because something is good does not mean it is now. Acting too early can be as harmful as acting too late. Discernment allows you to wait without anxiety and move without haste. Distractions drain spiritual authority. When your attention is divided, your power dissipates. Focus concentrates authority. Discernment refines focus. It teaches you to prioritize depth over breadth. God anoints focus. When your attention is aligned, your prayers become effective and your actions impactful. There are moments when God asks you to withdraw, not because you are failing, but because he is repositioning you. Discernment recognizes divine withdrawal as preparation, not rejection. Retreat is sometimes the strategy that preserves strength. Even Jesus withdrew to pray, to recalibrate, to realign. Discernment honors rhythm. Misassigned burdens create frustration. You try harder but feel emptier. Discernment lifts unnecessary weight. When you release what is not yours, joy returns. God's assignments energize even when they are challenging. His yoke is easy, not because it lacks responsibility, but because it fits perfectly. Discernment also governs speech. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence can be obedience. Words spoken prematurely can complicate outcomes. Discernment aligns your mouth with heaven's timing. What you say and when you say it can either accelerate purpose or create delay. God sharpens discernment through intimacy. The more you know his voice, the less you confuse it with others. Familiarity with God reduces vulnerability to deception. Discernment flows from relationship, not rule. You sense his approval, his caution, his peace. Intimacy trains perception. Distractions often masquerade as emergencies. Everything feels urgent when discernment is dull. God restores calm by restoring clarity. Not every crisis requires your intervention. Some battles are not yours to fight. Discernment teaches delegation to heaven. You learn to trust God with what you cannot control. When discernment increases, your life becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. Complexity often signals misalignment. God simplifies by narrowing focus. You stop juggling unnecessary commitments. Simplicity restores peace. Discernment removes clutter from the soul. God is also training you to discern people's access to your life. Not everyone deserves the same level of proximity. Discernment distinguishes between assignment partners, seasonal connections, and observers. Boundaries preserve calling. You can love people without giving them authority over your direction. Distractions weaken spiritual stamina. Discernment preserves strength for longevity. God is not preparing you for burnout. He is preparing you for endurance. Purpose is a marathon, not a sprint. Discernment sets pace. It teaches you to steward energy wisely. As discernment deepens, confidence grows. You no longer fear missing out because you trust God's guidance. What you release will not harm you. What you decline will not disqualify you. Discernment builds trust between you and God. Trust removes anxiety. This is a moment to examine your commitments without condemnation. Ask God to reveal what belongs and what distracts. Ask Him to clarify assignments and remove misdirection. He is faithful to guide hearts that seek alignment. I want to ask you something quietly and honestly, and I want you to answer it in the comments as an act of clarity and courage. What is one responsibility or distraction you feel God may be asking you to release in this season? And what is one assignment you sense He is calling you to focus on now? People of God, activation is not noise. It is obedience in motion. Purpose does not awaken through intention alone. It comes alive when clarity meets action. Many people have vision without movement, desire without discipline, calling without commitment. God is not merely revealing purpose to inspire you. He is activating purpose to transform how you live. Activation is the moment when what God has shown you begins to shape what you do, how you move, and why you move. Clarity is heaven's gift to remove hesitation. When God brings clarity, He is not giving you every detail. He is giving you enough direction to take the next step in faith. Confusion paralyzes, but clarity mobilizes. You do not need full visibility to walk in obedience. You need alignment with God's voice. When clarity comes, peace accompanies it. Even challenging steps feel steady when they are directed by God. Purpose-driven action is never frantic. It is intentional, measured, and rooted in trust. When action flows from clarity, striving ceases. You stop proving and start partnering. You stop reacting and start responding. Purpose-driven movement carries grace. Grace makes effort fruitful rather than exhausting. God never calls you to move without empowering you to sustain the movement. Many people delay action because they fear making mistakes. But clarity does not require perfection. It requires obedience. God does not activate purpose through flawless execution, but through willing surrender. Even missteps are redirected when the heart is aligned. Waiting for ideal conditions often disguises fear as wisdom. God activates purpose when you move with Him, not when circumstances are perfect. Peace is the confirmation that action is aligned. When God activates you, He does not strip you of rest. He infuses rest into movement. You can be active without being anxious. You can be productive without being pressured. Peace becomes the internal witness that you are operating within divine boundaries. If peace disappears, it is an invitation to pause, not to panic. Purpose-driven actions refine discipline. Discipline is not restriction. It is devotion expressed through consistency. When clarity aligns with discipline, habits change. You begin to order your days around what matters most. Time becomes intentional. Energy becomes focused. Discipline protects purpose from distraction. God strengthens discipline not to control you, but to free you from chaos. Activation often begins quietly. It does not always announce itself with applause or recognition. Sometimes it starts with small obedient steps that seem insignificant to others, but sacred to God. Heaven values faithfulness in hidden places. Small acts of obedience create momentum that leads to greater responsibility. Purpose grows through stewardship. God activates purpose by stretching comfort zones. Growth requires discomfort, but discomfort does not mean danger. Fear often surfaces when purpose awakens because change challenges familiarity. God does not activate purpose to harm you. He activates it to mature you. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience in spite of fear. When you move with God, fear loses authority. Clarity also brings accountability. When God shows you what to do, responsibility follows. Activation demands ownership. You cannot claim purpose while avoiding commitment. Purpose carries weight. God entrusts purpose to those willing to carry responsibility with humility. Accountability strengthens character and preserves integrity. Purpose-driven action reshapes priorities. You stop investing energy in what does not advance calling. You begin to say no with peace and yes with conviction. Clarity sharpens focus. Focus multiplies impact. When your actions align with purpose, your life becomes coherent rather than fragmented. Peace guards activation from burnout. Burnout is often the result of operating outside divine assignment. When God activates you, he also sets limits. Limits are not obstacles. They are protection. Rest is part of purpose, not a reward for completing it. God designed rhythm into obedience. Ignoring rest disrupts alignment. God activates purpose through consistency, not intensity. Intense moments inspire, but consistent obedience transforms. Purpose is sustained by daily choices. Choosing faithfulness in routine moments matters. God watches how you steward ordinary days. Ordinary obedience produces extraordinary fruit over time. Clarity eliminates procrastination. When God speaks, delay becomes disobedience disguised as caution. Purpose waits for participation. Heaven moves when you move. Activation does not require loud declarations. It requires obedient steps. Even slow movement is powerful when directed by God. Peace also stabilizes emotions during activation. You learn to regulate reactions. You stop being driven by mood and start being governed by mission. Emotional maturity supports purpose. God aligns emotions with vision so feelings do not sabotage direction. Peace anchors you during uncertainty. Activation brings alignment between belief and behavior. What you confess aligns with how you live. Faith becomes visible through action. Purpose is expressed through choices, habits, and discipline. When belief and behavior align, credibility increases. Integrity strengthens authority. God activates purpose progressively. He does not overwhelm you with everything at once. He unfolds assignment layer by layer. Each step prepares you for the next. Obedience at one level unlocks access to the next. Progression preserves humility and dependence. Clarity also exposes resistance. Some hesitation comes from fear of change, fear of responsibility, fear of visibility. God does not condemn resistance. He confronts it with love. Activation invites surrender. Surrender releases power. When control is released, flow begins. Purpose-driven action requires trust. Trust that God will guide you as you move. Trust that correction will come if needed. Trust that provision will follow obedience. Trust replaces anxiety. When trust governs, peace remains intact. God activates purpose to serve others, not elevate ego. Purpose is not self-centered, it is kingdom-centered. Activation expands influence responsibly. Influence without character corrupts. God develops character alongside purpose to preserve integrity. Character anchors calling. Clarity transforms prayer life. You stop praying for direction and start praying for strength to obey. Prayer becomes partnership. Purpose-driven prayer aligns with action. Faith and works operate together. God responds to prayers that advance his will. Activation requires patience. Growth does not happen overnight. Fruit develops in time. Trust the process. God is more interested in depth than speed. Depth sustains longevity. Longevity glorifies God. Peace remains the governing witness throughout activation. Peace signals alignment. When peace is present, movement is safe. When peace withdraws, recalibration is needed. God uses peace as a compass. Purpose-driven action transforms identity. You stop seeing yourself as unqualified and start seeing yourself as commissioned. God qualifies those he calls. Activation awakens confidence rooted in obedience, not ego. Clarity also strengthens resilience. Challenges will arise, but purpose sustains perseverance. When difficulty comes, clarity reminds you why you started. Purpose fuels endurance. Endurance produces maturity. God activates purpose not to overwhelm you, but to fulfill you. Fulfillment flows from obedience. Joy emerges from alignment. Peace accompanies purpose. As you continue to move with clarity, discipline, and peace, purpose becomes a lived reality rather than a distant idea. People of God, sustaining alignment is not a momentary decision. It is a daily posture of obedience that keeps your spirit sensitive and your steps ordered. Alignment is maintained through consistency, not intensity. It is easy to feel aligned in powerful moments of prayer, worship, or revelation, but sustaining alignment requires faithfulness in ordinary days, quiet choices, unseen obedience. God is not impressed by occasional devotion. He is honored by continual surrender. Obedience is the language of alignment. It is not merely agreement with God's word. It is action that reflects trust in his wisdom. Obedience does not wait for understanding to be complete. It moves because faith recognizes God's authority even when clarity unfolds gradually. Sustained alignment comes when obedience becomes instinctive rather than conditional. When you respond to God not because it feels convenient, but because it feels right. Prayer is the environment where alignment is renewed. Prayer is not a ritual to maintain religious appearance. It is communion that preserves spiritual sensitivity. When prayer becomes a daily rhythm rather than an emergency response, discernment stays sharp. Prayer realigns perspective, softens resistance, and keeps the heart open to correction. Alignment weakens when prayer becomes sporadic and revives when prayer becomes consistent. Sensitivity to the Holy Spirit is cultivated through attention. The Spirit often speaks through subtle impressions, gentle convictions, and quiet nudges. When life becomes loud, sensitivity dulls. Sustaining alignment requires intentional listening. Listening is an act of humility. It acknowledges that God's guidance matters more than personal preference. Sensitivity grows where surrender is practiced. Obedience protects alignment from drift. Drift rarely happens suddenly. It happens gradually through small compromises. Small deviations from obedience accumulate into significant misalignment. God calls you back, not through condemnation, but through conviction. Conviction is love, correcting direction. When you respond quickly to conviction, alignment is restored swiftly. Daily obedience requires discipline. Discipline is devotion structured into habits. Habits shape identity. When obedience is practiced daily, it becomes part of who you are rather than something you perform. God strengthens discipline to support alignment. Discipline guards against inconsistency and preserves spiritual momentum. Sustaining alignment also involves humility. Pride resists correction. Humility welcomes adjustment. When humility governs, alignment deepens. God gives grace to the humble, and grace empowers obedience. Alignment flourishes where humility allows God to refine motives, attitudes, and responses. Sensitivity to the Spirit requires stillness. Stillness is not inactivity, it is attentiveness. It creates space for God to speak without interruption. Many miss divine instruction because they move too quickly to hear. Stillness sharpens perception. In stillness, alignment is clarified and peace is restored. Obedience sometimes requires letting go of familiar comforts. Comfort can become a distraction if it replaces dependence on God. Sustaining alignment may require choosing faith over familiarity. God does not remove comfort to harm you. He does it to grow you. Growth stretches capacity and strengthens trust. Prayer also keeps alignment rooted in gratitude. Gratitude shifts focus from lack to provision. When gratitude flows, contentment grows. Contentment resists envy and comparison. Comparison disrupts alignment by pulling attention toward other people's assignments. Gratitude anchors you in your own calling. Sensitivity to the Spirit includes responsiveness. Delayed obedience weakens alignment. God values prompt response. Prompt obedience keeps momentum. When you respond quickly, clarity increases. Delay often introduces doubt. Responsiveness builds confidence in God's guidance. Sustaining alignment also requires guarding the heart. What you allow into your heart influences your direction. Bitterness, resentment, and unforgiveness cloud discernment. God calls you to release emotional weight that hinders alignment. Forgiveness restores clarity. Healing preserves obedience. Prayer strengthens spiritual resilience. Resilience allows you to remain aligned even when circumstances challenge faith. Alignment is not proven when everything is calm. It is revealed when pressure rises. Prayer stabilizes the heart under pressure. Stability preserves direction. Obedience also requires trust during uncertainty. God does not always explain his methods. He asks for trust. Trust maintains alignment when answers are delayed. When trust governs, peace remains intact. Peace confirms alignment. Sensitivity to the Holy Spirit includes recognizing when to rest. Rest is obedience. Ignoring rest destructs alignment. God designed rest as renewal. Rest restores sensitivity. Fatigue dulls discernment. Sustaining alignment includes honoring God's rhythm of work and rest. Daily obedience involves aligning words with faith. Speech reflects belief. Negative declarations erode alignment. God invites you to speak life, truth, and faith consistently. Words carry direction. Aligned speech supports aligned action. Prayer also refines desires. God reshapes desires to align with purpose. Misaligned desires create internal conflict. When desires align with God's will, peace flows. Prayer aligns longing with obedience. Sensitivity grows through obedience in small things. God often tests faithfulness in details. Small obediences train spiritual muscles. Faithfulness in small things sustains alignment in larger assignments. God entrusts more to those who steward well. Sustaining alignment requires community discernment. God uses wise counsel to confirm direction. Isolation can distort perception. Godly counsel sharpens clarity. Alignment strengthens in accountable relationships. Love protects relationships. Obedience also involves submission to God's authority. Submission is not weakness. It is strength under control. Submission aligns will with God's will. When will submits, resistance dissolves. Prayer keeps alignment centered on God rather than outcomes. Obedience is not transactional. You do not obey to manipulate results. You obey because God is worthy of trust. Outcomes belong to God. Alignment frees you from outcome obsession. Sensitivity to the Spirit grows as you obey promptly. Prompt obedience trains spiritual hearing. Hearing becomes clearer with practice. Alignment becomes easier with repetition. Sustaining alignment includes releasing control. Control creates tension. Surrender creates peace. God leads best when control is released. Alignment flourishes in surrendered hearts. Daily obedience requires patience with yourself. Growth is progressive. God does not demand perfection. He desires faithfulness. Grace supports obedience. Grace lifts you when you stumble and guides you back into alignment. Prayer also strengthens joy. Joy is strength. Joy fuels obedience. When joy fades, alignment weakens. Joy returns through intimacy with God. Intimacy restores delight in obedience. Sensitivity includes recognizing seasons. God adjusts assignments by season. Sustaining alignment requires flexibility. What worked before may need adjustment now. Sensitivity discerns transitions. Obedience keeps identity anchored. You obey because you belong to God, not to earn acceptance. Identity fuels obedience. When identity is secure, alignment is stable. Prayer realigns motives. Motives drift subtly. God purifies motives through prayer. Pure motives sustain alignment. God responds to sincere hearts. Sustained alignment requires vigilance. Vigilance guards against subtle drift. God invites watchfulness. Watchfulness preserves clarity. Sensitivity to the Spirit keeps faith alive. Faith listens, faith obeys, faith trusts. Faith sustains alignment through seasons of uncertainty. Daily obedience shapes destiny gradually. Destiny is built through daily choices. Alignment today secures tomorrow. Prayer remains the anchor. Obedience remains the expression. Sensitivity remains the guide. Alignment remains the fruit of a life surrendered to God's direction and purpose. People of God, as we come to the close of this sacred moment, take a breath and recognize that alignment is not something you strive for. It is something you receive when you yield. What God has been doing in this time is not emotional, it is spiritual. He has been adjusting vision, settling the heart, and ordering steps so that you do not just survive the week ahead, but walk through it with intention, peace, and divine awareness. Let your spirit remain still long enough to trust what God has already set in motion. You do not need to rehearse fear or replay uncertainty. What God aligns, He sustains. What He orders, He protects. You are not walking alone into this week. You are not walking